Okay, so from there we start to think, right, well, what is it that we're really looking for when we're working with a client or patient? What are the things, perhaps even, that the client might say that we can try to evoke from them and we can try to encourage and reinforce from them, and that might actually start to predict actual change? So there's a number of mechanisms that we're really trying to keep our ears out for as we're talking to people. And probably the term that they've come up with for this is something called change talk. Change talk relates, well, basically to the things people say that are their arguments for change. And we're wanting as clinicians, in some ways this is where the hard work comes in for us, because we're really wanting to listen out for this change talk, the things that people say that argues for change. And there's some common bits to change talk that we want to try to hear. Firstly, desire for change. So where people start to talk about what they'd like to do differently, or what they'd like to change, what their preference would be, putting aside, you know, how to do it or whether they really feel like they can or whatever, just what their preference would be, what their wish would be for change, their desire for change. Secondly, we listen out for ability change talk. So that relates to, you know, if they were to make a change, how would they do it? What strategies might they use? It also refers a little bit to how confident they might feel about change. Remember, we said before we wanted to support self-efficacy. So in terms of ability change talk, we're wanting to listen out for little clues that the person might be saying that in fact they might be high or low in confidence about change. The third is reasons for change talk. Reasons for change, in fact, out of these different elements of change talk, reasons for change is probably the most predictive of actual change. So we're wanting to hear people's reasons. This is the specific arguments for change, why they would do it, what would be good about it, that sort of thing. So reasons for change talk we're wanting to listen out for and encourage. And finally, need. What's important for them about change? Why do they need to? Why does it matter? This is often the more viscerally felt kind of reason, the emotional reasons for change. And it's often based on things like the person's values. You know, that often if there is a discrepancy between a person's values and what they're doing, then that creates need for actual change now. So just to give you, I guess, a few little examples of these different types of change talk, if someone said, if I could just give up, I'm sure I'd feel better. That's sort of an example of desire for change talk. That's what they would like to do if they could. You know, that would be their preference. If I could just give up, I'm sure I'd feel better. Secondly, with some tips from you about a healthy diet and maybe steps to follow, I could follow a plan. That's an example of ability change talk. That's them saying, well, perhaps, perhaps I could do it. I feel, some confidence about that. But it also gives you a bit of a clue as well. It's saying, with some tips from you. So it's ability change talk. There's some confidence there, but they're wanting some tips from you, some advice as well. The third example there is, I guess if I gave up smoking, my kids would be happier and stop bugging me so much. So these might be a couple of specific reasons for change. So that's reasons change talk. And if you hear something like that, it's really useful to then help the person to elaborate on that. So you might say, you feel like your kids would be happier. Tell me more about that. Tell me more about your kids and how they feel about your smoking, for example. So you hear reasons for change talk and you help people to elaborate on those reasons. And the fourth example, I wake up in the morning and just can't function properly. I've got to be able to function better, otherwise I might get the sack. That's need change talk. That's why this is important for them right now. This is the more emotional element of why they might need to change right now. So those are just some little examples, but we're wanting to be listening out for those kind of statements, that kind of talk, that change talk from people. And when we hear it, we're wanting to help them to elaborate on it, give examples, and gradually help them to explore that side of their ambivalence. Probably from change talk though, we help people to arrive at some sort of commitment language. The thing that really predicts actual change is what people feel willing to commit to. And so commitment language is really the bottom line, and that's the thing that often predicts actual change. And that's really just statements of commitments, things that people say that indicate some sort of intention or agreement or even obligation to doing something, to taking some sort of action. The stronger the statements of commitment, the more likely people will change. Something like, well, I guess tomorrow I will try and go out for a walk. That's commitment language, but lower strength. It's the I will try sort of an idea. And so if we hear someone say something like that, then it really becomes important to then start to think, well, how can we strengthen that commitment? What might the person be able to do to feel more confident or more able to actually take that next step? Through to something like, I will. I will leave here and I'll go to the grocery store and I'll get a healthy selection of food to cook tonight. If a person's saying, I will, then that indicates, a higher strength in commitment of change. Now, commitment language doesn't guarantee anything. We have heard the people that say, no, I'm going to leave here and I'm going to throw all my cigarettes in the bin and I will never smoke again. Next week they come back and, well, I'm sort of still smoking. So it doesn't guarantee anything. It just increases the chances that they will be able to make these changes that are part of their goals. So we have this kind of this exploring of the change talk that kind of leads to some sort of commitment language, and then we try to strengthen that commitment language to help them to get over the line with change. Remember that we're dealing with ambivalence though. We're dealing with people who feel two ways about change. And so on the one hand, we'll hear change talk and we can elaborate on that and help them to give examples and so on and work towards commitment language. We also have to keep our ears open for the flip side, which I guess we call sustained talk. This is the sorts of things that people say that in a sense just are the arguments or the reasons why against change. It's not necessarily something like resistance or something that's very negative in the interaction. It's more just the other side of ambivalence, just the other things that we have to also hear and listen to and validate because those are the things that might make change difficult. And it's the same sort of dimensions. So people might talk about their desire for the status quo. The status quo in some way is just their preference or their wish. They might talk about their inability to change or the kind of the low confidence around actually being able to change. They might talk about certain reasons for the status quo or need for the status quo. And ultimately, people may commit to the status quo. They may make a commitment to continue with their current diet or continue with their current exercise or whatever, a commitment to the status quo. So just to give, I guess, a few examples on this as well, I really don't think I would want to lose my sleep-ins. So that's an example of desire for the status quo. Their preference is really not to get up early. They'd prefer to just sleep in as they're doing. Secondly, I could tell you that I'm going to leave here and go for a walk tonight, but I just don't think I have what it takes to actually do it. So that's a sense of inability for change. It's a nice one though, because it's the person really kind of being honest with you and sort of not trying to tell you what you might want to hear, but instead just expressing that side of ambivalence. Part of this is I don't feel like I have what it takes to do it. Gives you a lot to go on. A third example, time really is of the essence for me. I just don't have the time to do exercise. That becomes a reason for the status quo. Time, and you probably hear that a lot, time is one of the reasons why people find it hard to change or in this case to do exercise. And the fourth example, I need to sleep in whenever I can and I need to relax when I get home in the evenings. Exercise necessarily comes last for me. So that's the need for the status quo. The person feels the need to not change. So we're listening out and elaborating and encouraging the change talk, and we're also listening out for sustained talk, accepting it, validating it, but helping people to move back towards change. So part of that facilitation that we're doing as clinicians is helping to accept the sustained talk, but also helping people to move back towards change. and to explore that side of ambivalence, to explore the desirability, reasons and need for change. And so we end up with a sort of a flow. We end up with a flow of change, which is motivational interviewing is really about exploring desirability, reason and need, flowing that through to some sort of commitment for change, and it's that process that actually leads to change itself.